Good morning, good afternoon, and thank you everybody for the opportunity to participate. For this session, just a quick framing. When we look back at the spring when COVID-19 disrupted the formal education of more than 1.7 billion students worldwide, leaders, educators, teachers, and students and families showed remarkable flexibility, adaptability, and dedication as they work to keep learning happening for all students. And now as we start a new school year, disruptions continue to present significant challenges, but they've also inspired a re-examining and reimagining of education systems to build a future of learning that is personalized around the student and that is supported by teachers and technology. From our own work at Microsoft, we know from research that we called the Class of 2030 and Life-Ready Learning that moving forward, we see an increase in the importance of social emotional skills, higher level cognitive skills, personalized learning becoming very critical, as well as teaching is really a growth profession as we move forward. And so from our work, we're really looking to develop technologies that help enable all students to develop the skills essential for work and for life. And so it's wonderful to be part of this event today, and I'm honored to discuss key approaches in education with Governor Bill Lee of Tennessee. Thank you so much for joining us, Governor.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm honored to be here as well. It's a great audience, great organization. Proud to be here.
Thank you so much. So 2020 with COVID-19, tornadoes, wildfires, it's been a super challenging year. And what can we learn from your experience in your state on education attainment in particular? And how do you look at that moving forward?
It has been a remarkable year for certain, one of the most difficult years certainly that the country has faced, but our state it is no exception to that. So we had horrific tornadoes the first week of March and the third week of March. We had massive line of violent storms that crossed all the way across our state, significant loss of life. And then 2 days later, our first COVID-19 case came. So we had multiple school districts closed prior to COVID, and then we certainly started closing down schools in March and April. So we were faced with the same challenges that others have. We quickly saw the extent of those challenges. And I've long believed that in-person learning is clearly the best approach. I think everyone knows that, but we have to do so in a way recognizing the circumstances. In the spring, that was impossible to do, but we were seeing the ill effects of that throughout the summer. Not only academically, and we didn't really assess academic loss until we started back in school in the fall, but you know, our child abuse reported cases dropped by 25% over the summer. And we knew that child abuse wasn't going down. It was the reporting mechanism of teachers that have eyes on kids that they care about. Students with disabilities that don't get services. The huge challenge associated with feeding those who get nutrition in schools. Mental health services for kids with any variety of mental health needs. So we knew all of that was happening, which is why we spent most of the summer saying we've got to get our kids back in school if that's at all possible. We believed that just like economic recovery, that protecting lives in a public health pandemic is of utmost importance, but protecting livelihoods has a significant importance as well. Same with going to school. Protecting kids, protecting teachers, but doing everything we can to give parents a choice of putting their kids into school. So about 6 weeks ago, we started our first in-person district schools. Most of the districts in our state are open for in-person learning with a choice for every parent to choose distance learning. And we know it can happen. We believe that it can happen safely. We've worked really hard. We can talk a little bit about that later, but we've worked hard to make sure that we can provide that opportunity. And now we're in the stage of assessment to just see where our kids are now that they are, for the most part, the vast majority of them back in the classroom.
That's wonderful to hear. And as we know from, there's lots of studies out there in terms of the dependency of quality teaching and quality teachers, of how important that is to the student experience as well as the learning outcomes for the students, and how important that relationship is for the students to have. And so, as we know, the profession of teaching is going to grow very significantly as we move forward, just with new generations coming in. And at the same time, there already is a shortage of teachers. So can you share a little bit with us kind of how you're looking at that in your state in terms of the need for teachers, as well as at the same time a real shortage of teachers?
Well, let me just say the role of a teacher today is harder than it's ever been. Teachers have an incredible task. I'm married to a former teacher who knows from firsthand experience the challenges of teaching. So it's an incredible profession that is born out of a real desire beyond just having that job. It's a calling for most. And so I appreciate the role that they play now, especially in this unique environment they find themselves in. I said in my State of the State this past year in January that when it comes to educating our children, there is nothing more important than attracting, retaining, and training the best and brightest teachers in America right here into Tennessee. I wholeheartedly believe that. Teaching is a remarkable profession, but if we don't invest in the next generation of teachers and frankly invest in the current professional development of our teachers, then we won't have the best education system in the country, which is what I hope to have. So we have a couple of initiatives that we've brought forth. I'll mention before I say these initiatives, COVID-19 has disrupted everything in this country, including initiatives and budget proposals and efforts that we're making going forward. But COVID-19 does not squash my vision. It is a serious bump in the road. I don't want to call it a bump in the road, something that's caused hundreds of thousands of lives lost, but in the sense that we have a great obstacle to overcome with COVID, but we cannot stop thinking about what we do going forward. So we've developed an initiative to grow your own teachers, particularly in rural counties. We have many rural districts in this state, to engage high school students in really an apprenticeship sort of fashion in their local high school, and encourage them into education in their post-secondary so that they can come back to their counties and teach. And we have a program designed to incentivize that. We also created the Governor's Teaching Fellowship, which provides for scholarships for the best and brightest kids who choose to enter the education field in our state, so that we can kind of get back to that smartest kid in the class going into education. And certainly that happens in some cases, but we want that to be broader across the state. These are examples of how we can attract the best and brightest. And then, when we think about our educational system and how we teach, even in the midst of this incredible change where folks are having to look at alternative ways of teaching their kids, we want to make sure that there are a lot of options for parents, whether it's charter schools, whether it's homeschooling choices, increasing our public school teaching curriculum and our teacher training programs. We just rolled out we passed a piece of legislation that's an education savings account program that allows parents to ultimately have an option for where their kids, where we spend the education dollars that are theirs, that the government spends either on their behalf or gives them to spend on educational outcomes. It's tied up in court right now, that initiative, but there are a lot of families right now that are wishing they had that option, and we believe that'll happen in our state. So I'm a strong believer in that issue of choice, but as it relates in particular to how we train up the next generation of teachers, it's important.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned earlier, as people are coming back for the new school year. Obviously, health and safety for students, for teachers, and the broader community is really critical. And that's where, the lines between education and public health become more fluid. Can you share how you've addressed that in Tennessee as you were looking to bring students back into school?
Yeah, it is. There are fluid lines there, very much connected. Public health is now in the midst of the pandemic that we're facing now. Public health is injected into every aspect of our state government, but also really into our society. So, and that's true also with education. There is a great need to understand how it is that we can create an environment that is safe for teachers, for students, and at the same time pursue this commitment for the highest level of learning possible in the midst of the challenges that we face. We have set up in our state what we call the Unified Command Group. It's an interesting approach to tackling the challenges of COVID, but we brought together the departments in our state that are most powerfully affected. So it's the Department of Health and the Department of Education and our Emergency Management Agency and the Department of Military, because of their key role in testing in our state, and what we call economic recovery groups. So our Education and Department of Health are meeting together every day, commissioners from our Department of Education and Department of Health, because we are so interconnected. It's how we've developed really, we think, a leading strategy for preparing safe classrooms. We put together 80,000 safety kits, one for every classroom, and shipped them to every classroom in our state through our emergency management agency. That gives every teacher masks, gloves, face shields, disinfectant, a kit. And our intention is to continue that. It was 2 months initially, but our intention is to have that for the entire school year. So that's one small way that we incorporated health and education. We also believe that it's important that we understand what's happening from a health perspective in our schools. A lot of departments of health work independently in reporting what's happening in schools, but we have developed a dashboard in our state through the Department of Education that is populated with information from the districts regarding number of COVID cases, the number of schools that are actually closed due to quarantine. And I'm really pleased that of our 1,800 schools, we only have about 0.5% of those schools are closed due to quarantine 6 weeks in. In part, I think, because of health and education's concerted work together to make sure we had safe classrooms and good protocols for when there's a case and that sort of thing. But this dashboard has been brought forth. It's been quite a challenge to bring it forth, but we do have to recognize in this new environment, just like lives and livelihoods, lives and education of our kids, both can coexist, but only if we work really hard together, recognizing that health and education go hand in hand more than ever right now.
It's great to hear you talk about how you're bringing all of these different things together. And, even, before COVID, there was a lot of transformation, a lot of change happening in education. Of course, COVID has accelerated a lot of these things, K-12 all the way through higher education. And so between reimagining education as well as skilling and work-life readiness, obviously that's a longer journey. How are you thinking about that sort of journey to really get students ready for work in different parts of the education journey?
I love talking about this subject. It's probably the thing that I was most excited about actually when I came into office. So I never had run for office before I became governor. I came from the private sector into this role. And I actually ran a company for 25 years and was engaged in an industry that mostly employed skilled tradespeople. And my company actually employed about 1,500 people, most of them plumbers and pipe fitters and welders and electricians. We were in the construction and service business. I actually have a mechanical engineering background. So I have a great personal appreciation and understanding of the need for workforce development through our education system and the holes that, from my perspective as an employer, that I saw in education. So the first thing I did when I became governor was we brought forth an initiative that turned into legislation called the Governor's Investment in Vocational Education Act, the GIVE Act. Initially, it put in place $25 million to start a series of programs that are really partnerships with our high schools. And we have a series of post-secondary schools called Colleges of Applied Technology, Tennessee Colleges of Applied Technology, TCATs. And those are, we also have a program here called Tennessee Promise that provides free community college or TCAT college to any high school, graduating high school senior. So that combination of partnerships between high school programs of technical, vocational, agricultural education and our TCAT system really starts changing the way high school looks. I have a great belief that high school should look different. It should be much more matched to the skills and needs and pathways for success for every one of our children, whether they're going to become a doctor, a lawyer, a plumber, a teacher, whatever skill set they have. We need to create those pathways of opportunity. And so vocational education is a big deal to me.
Yeah, and within that, how are you looking at technical skilling as well, knowing that, you know, as we move forward, students and the workforce will need a lot more technical skills. So I'm curious to learn how you're looking at, especially the part of technical skilling.
So I was just on a Zoom call with the president of your company, talking with leaders. It was a number of folks talking specifically about this, like the idea of technology and our education system. So we called this the GIVE Act, but we recognize it's not just, we wanted to use the term vocational education because we wanted there to be a broad understanding that this is about plumbing and pipe fitting and welding, but it's also about coding and computer science. And we have made a significant investment in the area, for example, of AP computer science classes being placed in every school. We have a strategy to have a third of our high schools designated as STEM designated schools by 2022. We recognize that this idea of CTE or vocational education includes educating our kids in technology. It also means that we utilize technology to educate our children. We've invested $100 million in our state in broadband expansion in Tennessee. I grew up in rural Tennessee. I recognize the challenges of educating children when you don't have broadband, particularly in this environment, and all the additional things like working from home and telemedicine and the things that really are necessary if we want to have pathways to success for everyone. So we invest in that technology. We also spent, through this pandemic, $70 million in technology grants to schools to get technology in the hands of kids across our state so that whatever education looks like on the backside of this, and it certainly will look better. This COVID, as tragic and difficult as it is, it's like any challenge in all of our lives. I say, you know, God uses the worst circumstances in our lives to bring about the greatest level of transformation. And I think that's possible even in our education system. We'll be better on the other side of this because of it, if we address it correctly. So technology plays a big role in the way we teach kids and also in what how we engage them.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I know we're already coming to the end of the session. And so, as you know, the core theme of the event is lifting state leadership. And let's fast forward to your final address to the people of Tennessee and reflecting on your service as a governor. What do you hope you will be able to say regarding your progress in education?
Yeah, I hope that when that day comes, I can look at the people of Tennessee and say, we have built an education system that works for every kid, whether regardless of their zip code, regardless of their skill set, regardless of the way their brain works, regardless of the way their hands are connected to their brains or not, or whether they can compute a certain way or not. That, you know, kids have great number of giftings and skills. They also have a variety of barriers that keep them from using those giftings and skills to become a successful adult. I want to create an education system that works for every kid to diminish their barriers and to provide a pathway of success for every single one of them.
Thank you so much, Governor. It's inspiring to hear that in terms of creating an environment that is very inclusive and helps and empowers all students to achieve and reach their goals and their dreams. So thank you so much for sharing your thoughts in the session, and we'll continue the programming.
Thank you very much.